Section 2 of Thoughts on Art and Life. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Tom Davis Beale. Thoughts on Art and Life by Leonardo da Vinci, translated by Maurice Baring and edited by Lewis Einstein. Thoughts on Life, Part 2. Infinity incomprehensible. What is that thing which is not defined and would not exist if it were defined? It is infinity, which, if it could be defined, would be limited and finite, because that which can be defined ends with the limits of its circumference, and that which cannot be defined has no limits. O contemplators of things, do not pride yourself for knowing those things which nature by herself and her ordination naturally conduces, but rejoice in knowing the purposes of those things which are determined by your mind. Insoluble questions. Consider, O reader, how far we can lend credence to the ancients who strove to define the soul and life, things which cannot be proved, while those things which can be clearly known and proved by experience remained during so many centuries ignored and misrepresented. The eye, which so clearly demonstrates its functions, has been, up to my time, defined in one manner by countless authorities. I, by experience, have discovered another definition. Beauty of nature's inventions. Although human ingenuity may devise various inventions which, by the help of various instruments, answer to one and the same purpose, yet it will never discover any inventions more beautiful, more simple, or more practical than those of nature, because in her inventions there is nothing lacking and nothing superfluous, and she makes use of no counterpoise which she constructs to the limbs of animals in such a way as to correspond to the motion of their bodies, but she puts them in the soul of the body. This is not the proper place for this discourse, which belongs rather to the subject of the composition of animated bodies, and the rest of the definition of the soul I leave to the minds of the friars, the fathers of the people, who know all secrets by inspiration. I leave the sacred books alone, because they are the supreme truth. Completeness in knowledge. Those who seek to abbreviate studies do injury to knowledge and to love, because the love of anything is the daughter of this knowledge. The fervency of the love increases in proportion to the certainty of the knowledge, and the certainty issues from a complete knowledge of all the parts, which, united, compose the totality of the thing which ought to be loved. Of what value, then, is he who abbreviates the details of those matters of which he professes to render a complete account, while he leaves behind the chief part of the things of which the whole is composed? It is true that impatience, the mother of stupidity, praises brevity, as if such persons had not life long enough to enable them to acquire a complete knowledge of one subject, such as the human body, and then they seek to comprehend the mind of God, in which the universe is included, weighing it and splitting it into infinite particles, as if they had to dissect it. O human folly! Dost thou not perceive that thou hast been with thyself all thy life, and thou art not yet aware of the thing which more fully than any other thing thou dost possess, namely, thy own folly? And thou desirest, with the multitude of sophists, to deceive thyself and others, despising the mathematical sciences in which truth dwells and the knowledge of the things which they contain. And then thou dost busy thyself with miracles, and writest that thou hast attained to the knowledge of those things which the human mind cannot comprehend, which cannot be proved by any instance in nature, and thou deemest that thou hast wrought a miracle in spoiling the work of some speculative mind. and thou perceivest not that thy error is the same as that of a man who strips a plant of the ornament of its branches covered with leaves, mingled with fragrant flowers and fruits. Just as Justinius did when he abridged the stories written by Trogus Pompeius, who had written elaborately the noble deeds of his forefathers, which were full of wonderful beauties of style, and thus he composed a barren work, worthy only of the impatient spirits who deem that they are wasting the time which they might usefully employ in studying the works of nature and mortal affairs. But let such men remain in company with the beasts, let dogs and other animals full of rapine be their courtiers, and let them be accompanied with these running over at their heels, and let the harmless animals follow, in which the season of the snows come to the houses begging alms as from their master. Nature. Nature is full of infinite causes which are beyond the pale of experience. Nature, in creating first, gives size to the abode of the intellect, the skull, the head, and then to the abode of the vital spirit, the chest. Law of necessity. Necessity is the mistress and guide of nature. Necessity is the theme and inventress of nature, her curb and her eternal law. When anything is the cause of any other thing, and brings about by its movement any effect, the movement of the effect necessarily follows the movement of the cause. Of lightning in the clouds. O mighty and once living instrument of creative nature, unable to avail thyself of thy great strength, thou must needs bend in a life of tranquillity, and obey the law which God and time give to nature the mother. Ah! How often the frighted shoals of dolphins and great tunny fish were seen fleeing before thy inhuman wrath, whilst thou, fulminating with swift beating of wings and twisted tail, raised in the sea a sudden storm with buffeting and sinking of ships and tossing of waves, filling the naked shores with terrified and distracted fishes. The human eye. Since the eye is the window of the soul is always fearful of losing it, so much so that if a man is suddenly frightened by the motion or an object before him, he does not with his hands protect his heart, the source of all life, nor his head, where dwells the lord of the senses, nor the organs of hearing, smell, and taste. But as soon as he feels fright, it does not suffice him to close the lids of his eyes, keeping them shut with all his might, but he instantly turns in the opposite direction, and, still not feeling secure, he covers his eyes with one hand, stretching out the other to ward off the danger in the direction in which he suspects it to lie. Nature again has ordained that the eye of man shall close of itself, so that remaining during his sleep without protection, it shall suffer no hurt. Universal law. Every object naturally seeks to maintain itself in itself. The part always tends to reunite with its whole in order to escape from its imperfection. The soul desires to remain with its body, because without the organic instruments of that body it can neither act nor feel. The lover is moved by the object he loves as the senses are by sensible things, and they unite and become one and the same. The work is the first thing which is born of this union. If the thing loved is base, the lover becomes base. When what is united is in harmony with that which receives it, delight, pleasure, and satisfaction ensue. When the lover is united to the beloved, he rests there. When the burden is laid down, it finds rest there. A natural action is accomplished in the briefest manner. Nature variable and infinite. To such an extent does nature delight and abound in variety, that among her trees there is not one plant to be found which is exactly like another, and not only among the plants, but among the boughs, the leaves, and the fruits, you will not find one which is exactly similar to another. If nature had made one rule for the quality of limbs, the faces of men would resemble each other to such a degree that it would not be possible to distinguish one from the other. But she has varied the 5 features of the face in such a way that, although she has made an almost universal rule with regard to their size, she has not done so with regard to their quality, so that each one can be clearly distinguished from the other. It is an easy matter for him who knows man to arrive at universal knowledge, since all terrestrial animals are similar in regard to their structure, that is to say, in regard to the muscles and bones, and they do not vary save in height and thickness. Then there are the aquatic animals, and I will not persuade the painter that any rule can be made with regard to these, because they are of infinite variety. So are the insects. The body of anything which is fed is continually dying and being reborn, since nourishment cannot enter save where the past nourishment is exhausted. And if it is exhausted, it no longer has life, and if you do not furnish it with nourishment equal to that which has been before, you will impair the health of the organism, and if you deprive it of this nourishment, life will be altogether destroyed. But if you supply it with so much as can be consumed in a day, then as much life will be restored as was consumed, like the light of the candle which is furnished to it by the fuel provided by the moisture of the candle. And this light, with most speedy succour, restores beneath what is consumed above as it dies in dusky smoke. And this death is continuous, likewise the continuity of the smoke is equal to the continuity of the fuel. And in the same moment the light dies and is born together with the movement of its fuel. Man and animals are in reality vehicles and conduits of food, tombs of animals, hostels of death, coverings that consume, deriving life by the death of others. Light. Look on light and consider its beauty. Shut your eyes and look again. That which you see was not there before, and that which was no longer is. Who is he who remakes it if the producer is continually dying? Anaxagoras. Everything proceeds from everything, and everything becomes everything, because that which exists in the elements is composed of those elements. End of section 2.